Hello fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. So I'm continuing on my director retrospective series focusing on Guillermo Del Toro films, and today we're looking at his fifth film, Pan's Labyrinth. Now this is quite an extraordinary film, and for those who haven't seen it, this is what it really looks at. So it's set in 1944, and it tells the story of Ophelia, a young girl who discovers a fantastical world of woodland creatures when her mother takes her to northern Spain to join her stepfather, a brutish and bitter member of the General Franco's fascist army. Carmen, played by Adriana Gil, and her daughter Ophelia, played by Ivana Baquero. Her new life hard to bear, the young girl seeks refuge in a mysterious labyrinth she discovers next to the sprawling family farm. Pan, a magical creature, reveals that she is none other than the long-lost princess of Magical Kingdom. To discover the truth, Ophelia will have to accomplish 3 dangerous tasks. This was a very inventive and interesting film. I think Del Toro has such a great way of creating really interesting characters, and his creature designs are absolutely fantastic and look brilliant to watch, and this is no exception. I like how he combines 2 separate worlds here. So we have reality, we have war, and we're looking at the violence that people do to each other and how it isn't really a wonderful and fun and beautiful world that these characters are inhabiting. And then we look at the fantastical, magical underworld sort of look where everything's a bit more lighter and a bit more colourful. And there are still darknesses within it, but it ultimately adds a bit of magic and a bit of light to this particular heavy story. And I think these 2 halves are brilliant. I don't know if they quite mesh together perfectly, but I really like what Del Toro is doing here and the stories he's trying to tell, and how he really focuses on how it's not the creatures or the world that's dark and evil, it's man. In this, the general character that we focus on, who's of the army, is quite an aggressive and bitter and brutal man. And we can see that through this one particular scene where he beats this guy in the face with the end of a torch. It's so brutal and violent that you really go, okay, I know who this guy is. It's sort of a brutally and tragically beautiful film. There is a really lot to like about this film. It's beautifully shot. I like where it's set. I like the characters that inhabit the world. Ophelia's a great character, and Mercedes is another really interesting character whose brother is part of the army that's against this army, and she does everything she can to help him, support him, while working for this horrible man that she knows is responsible for so many deaths and violence within her community and in the country that they live. She's really great and has some really great moments, especially when she's found out to be working with her brother, and what they try and do to her and her reaction to that, what she does to this particular man that tries to hurt her, is just brutal but really powerful to watch. Ultimately, the magical world, you're not quite sure if this world is real or not. It starts explaining that there was this princess and that she escaped from there and went into the real world, and ultimately when she got there she died, but her father believed her soul would go on and appear once again in another young person, and they think it's Ophelia. And this particular creature comes to her and ultimately tells her that she is part of this world and that she is a princess, and he gives her 3 tasks to accomplish. And if she can accomplish these 3 tasks, she can come back home. And that's sort of interesting. The way she goes about it, she does make mistakes along the way, and she ultimately has to go and get this particular knife, and when she does that, she's told not to eat this food on this particular table because there's this creature sitting on the end of it. And ultimately she disobeys that because she's hungry and because she thinks no one will miss 2 grapes. Then the creature comes to life, played brilliantly by Doug Jones, this sort of skinny white creature with no eyes. His eyes are actually in his hands, and he goes like this to see. I really love that, and Doug Jones is fantastic in these scenes. But there's something really great about the magical world. It feels a lot like Alice in Wonderland, and obviously Labryinth, the David Bowie, Jennifer Connelly film that came out in the 80s. But it's so interesting to watch and so draws you into it. It's beautifully shot. It looks absolutely stunning. And the magical world's great, and the design of the creatures, like I said, is brilliant to watch. Del Toro is quoted as saying that his paycheck for the film he put back into it because he wanted to make the film exactly the way he wanted, and he didn't want any interruptions or anyone to tell him how he should do it. He wanted to do it exactly how he wanted. And I think he's crafted a great film because of this. This is this is the only film of his in the 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. And I can see why. It's just fantastic to watch. There is a lot of violence in it. There's a lot of brutality that happens within the movie. There's a particular scene where one character's face gets cut like this, but the way they do it is quite shocking but really impressive. The young girl who plays Ophelia, Ivana, she's fantastic. I think she does a really solid job, and she's a character we can get behind, and we can see her struggles and wanting to have something better in life and not being happy in this world or in this sort of place that she inhabits, and struggling with that, and how she ultimately imagines these other worlds and is interested in fairies. And then you start to question whether what she's seeing is only in her mind or is it a reality. And I really like that, and I think that really stands out. And her performance really stands out in this film. I think all the acting is brilliant in here. They're all really great Spanish actors who do a brilliant job. And some are menacing and some are interesting. And like I said, Doug Jones really stands out. And this was the third film he'd done with Del Toro, with Mimic and Hellboy being the other two. And he's just a master at prosthetics. He's a master at putting things on and bringing these characters to life in such an interesting, unique way. And he's a very underrated actor in my opinion. He gives great performances, and I really want to see much more of him, and he worked a lot more with Del Toro down the track as well. I think Del Toro is one of the most unique and creative artists out there who's doing unique and different things. And throughout his films, there is this real focus on that the creatures and whoever we meet aren't the bad people. It's the human beings, it's the men, it's the violence in the world, it's the bad people. And I think this is a theme that he has all the way through his films, which I really like. And I like how he decides to look at things in a different way. Like we focus on the young girl, and straight away we see this magical world she imagines or is allowed to see. But then we meet the creatures and we're not sure about them, but everything they do is a purpose and point and purpose. And they don't want to hurt anyone. They just want to be able to help her accomplish her goals or go back to where they believe she belongs, which I really loved. There's particular scenes that stand out for me in this film. When she first sees the world, she's first introduced to Pan and how that transpires is great. How she really cares about her mother and her obsession with sort of fairy tales and still hanging on to a youth. That's what I really like, is even though all this stuff happens to her, she's still able to maintain the young person she is. It really looks at that sort of thing and how a lot of fairy tales and classic sort of children's books aren't really for children. They sort of give the essence and the feeling of being a child again when you read them, especially as an adult. And I think her character represents hope. That there is this ability to see magic. There is this wonderful thing that can transpire even in the midst of these horrible circumstances and this war and everything that these characters are facing. There is hope. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that's what this film really feels like. So this is a bit of a spoiler if you haven't seen it, but ultimately Ophelia dies in the end. But it's this great moment where she's sort of laying dying, and then you see her in fantasy world and you go, wow, this is great. And I really hope that's where she ended up at the end of the film, because she really felt like she deserved to be there with all these terrible things that happen. She loses her father that we don't see earlier in the film. She loses her mother, but it's a sacrifice to protect her young brother that's been born without any family, and I really loved that. Del Toro is slowly becoming one of my favourite directors. I think he's brilliant. I like his creativity. I like his designs of things. I like the worlds he creates and the characters that he designs in those worlds. I like the look of them. I love when we first meet Pan, she has to go down this tree trunk like Alice in Wonderland falling down the rabbit hole. And she comes upon it and there's a lot of symbolism and labyrinth of statues and things on the ground that when we first meet him and see this world, that's what we first see. And I think that's kind of interesting. The creatures in it are quite well designed, especially Pan, and we get to meet the other creature who's like this. And there's also a frog character that we meet that provides her with something that she needs, a key that she needs to obtain in order to get all the things she needs for this particular quest she's going on. My only criticism, I guess, for this film is a lot of the visual effects are dated. Not the practical ones, but the digital ones, the computer animated ones. Like the frog itself, there's moments where it's animated that doesn't look great. And you start to notice this a bit more on Blu-ray, and especially with the sort of the villain of the piece getting shot in the end, it just doesn't look quite as effective as all the practical effects, but it still holds up and it still adds to the story, and I don't think it takes anything away from it. And like I said, I don't think it joins the two worlds perfectly, but it does a good job nonetheless. I'm really enjoying revisiting Del Toro's films, and this is probably one of my favorites and is beautifully done and perfectly executed in many ways. He really knows how he wants to shoot things. The camera movements, there's a lot of movements where the camera will pan from one thing into black into another. And that's something he used throughout his career and in a variety of other movies. And it's really well thought out how he uses those dissolves and transitions from one scene to the next. It's just fantastic, and definitely was worth the amount of Oscars that it received and its nominations for visual effects as well as cinematography, because it was beautifully done. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stick around, there will be more videos on Guillermo Del Toro's films, and I hope people are enjoying these director retrospective series. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit subscribe down the bottom. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.